This is the first ever travel blog film here on my channel on YouTube. Finally, as I was getting ready to leave Vilnius, I decided to film a little tour of the city where I lived for almost 3 years. As a keepsake for myself and for those who will watch this video, maybe you'll find it useful or learn something interesting. All over the city you can see these little doors. Gnomes actually live there. I never thought I would end up living here for almost 3 years. Vilnius has become filled with different places for me. By the way, if you like this genre and enjoy these kinds of films, give it a like and leave a comment. Comments. And then more films like this will appear. So this is the very entrance of the very house in Vilnius, where I lived for almost 3 years while I was in Vilnius. And today, finally, as I get ready to leave Vilnius, I decided to film a little tour of Vilnius, the city where I lived for almost 3 years, as a keepsake for myself and for those who will watch this video. Maybe you will find it useful to learn something interesting. So when I came to move into this wonderful house, I discovered a monument right next to it, to this remarkable person, John Lennon. This is Lennon Square in Vilnius. There is a monument to John Lennon, so if you're interested, you can find it and visit. Actually, this street is called Mindaugas, named after King Mindaugas. And further on, there's Kauno Street, Kauno Gatvė. And now we're going to continue into the old town, and I'll tell you about the places here that I often visited, walked around, and generally what I used to do here. This is the intersection of Mindaugas and Kauno streets. Over there is the store where I bought groceries all this time, because I was too lazy to go to other more distant stores. There's a hospital over there that was literally built before my eyes. I hadn't been here before, it used to be an empty lot. They built everything from scratch. And over there is the road to the old town. That's the way we're going to take now to get to the old town. Behind me is a beautiful example of Stalinist Empire-style architecture. This used to be the Vilnius Railway Workers' House of Culture. Now there are all sorts of different clubs in there. As for that rusty hook, I never figured out if it was always there, or maybe it's some kind of modern art. But overall, there are nightclubs and cafes there now. I never actually went to the clubs, but in previous years there was a cafe out on the veranda. I used to love sitting there with my friends. So if you ever visit Vilnius, be sure to check it out. It's a wonderful place. This is my favorite restaurant with the original name Muslim Halal. It's a restaurant serving Uzbek, Kyrgyz and other cuisines. It opened not too long ago, and their first restaurant was just around the corner. Because during my first years living here, I really suffered without plov and manti, since I'm an Eastern person. Even at home, my mom and grandmother used to make manti and plov. And finally, at some point here as well, in Vilnius, Uzbek and other Eastern restaurants started opening up actively, and now there are many of them. But these are the closest to me, and when I have a really intense craving for plov and manti, I would come here and eat them. If you pass by again, don't just walk past, have some manti. Across the street, there's an Armenian restaurant, but I've never actually been there. I don't know why it turned out that way, but maybe it's good too. It's called Ararat. This is St. Stephen's Street. It's located right next to my house, literally just a block away. A lot of well-known current residents of Vilnius, immigrants, also live here, but let's not reveal any secrets. But at one time, Pyotr Arkadievich Stolypin lived here. There's a plaque hanging here. He was the governor of the Vilnius region. And here in Lithuanian and Russian, it's written that he was a reformist minister. I don't know who lives there now, probably not any of Stolypin's descendants, but it's an interesting memorial plaque. But it's a very interesting old street, and it's also notable because over there it begins where the bus station is. And when I first came to Vilnius still, you could say, as a tourist, I arrived by bus at the central station and walked along this street to the city center, where my hotel was. So, for me, this street is probably the very first in Vilnius, the one where my acquaintance with the city began, back in, I think, maybe 2016 or 2017, a few years ago before I moved here. And at that time, I never even thought that I would ever live here. Let's keep walking down this street. So here it is, this very street. There are some very picturesque houses here. Not all of them. Some houses are quite ugly and some are not ugly at all. and these are actually about to be renovated. Well, and this is clearly an example of some Soviet-era buildings. Frankly, not the most successful one. When I saw this for the first time, I wasn't impressed. But it turned out that this isn't typical for Vilnius. The center of Vilnius is mostly built up with old, beautiful houses in good condition. And soon we'll show you all of this. You'll see with your own eyes that the old town, the old center of Vilnius, is actually quite lively, interesting, beautiful, and very pleasant. Especially in summer, and as you can tell, we're filming all of this in the summer. I didn't find out the name of this square, but in general, it's notable for having this kind of Easter egg here. For some time now, I don't know what it is, probably some kind of modern art, but it's been standing here for a long time. You see, the egg isn't very new, but it's a very picturesque, pleasant square, and it's personally special to me. First of all, my favorite barbershop is there. I get my hair cut there, just because it happened that way. And around the corner, there's a cafe called Basilisk on Basilisk. I celebrated my first birthday in Vilnius there, and it was very interesting, a diverse crowd, unexpected, because I didn't know many people. I invited everyone I knew, and in general, a group gathered. It's a very nice, good place. Right here, this is where the church begins. Big and beautiful. It's called All Saints. And further on, this is called Pylimo Street. It goes from the train station to the city center. There's a market there. And in general, I've walked along this street many times and still do, because it connects everything. It's an artery, so we're going to continue on to the old town now, but I just wanted to make a stop here for a moment. This is the Church of All Saints. I really like it because it's a very touching, provincial kind of Baroque. I especially like these curls here, like this. They remind me of grey curls, like hair. But this is an active church, a real one, dedicated to All Saints. I just really like its naturalness. This is called Rudninkų Square, and this is the street. Here it is. And here there's a place called Pizzeria Casa La Familia. Some people think it's called Paisaraidžia, but it's actually a pizzeria. It's just written in Lithuanian. In Lithuanian it's spelled that way, but it's a pizzeria. Nearby there's a very sad poster, a sign. These are the plans of the ghetto. There were two ghettos in Vilnius, the large and the small, and this is the territory of the large Vilnius ghetto, which was liquidated already in 1944. If you go further over there, there is a building where the Judenrat was located, that is the ghetto council. It's quite an unpleasant place, but it existed. Now it's just the old town here, a wonderful square, there's a beer garden over there, and it's also very nice to spend summer days here. And right there, this place right here, Vino Bares is written. It's also a good wine bar where Italian people work and treat everyone. Well, not treat, let's be honest, they sell wine. From the very beginning, since I arrived in Vilnius, I've constantly encountered Krishnite enlightenment. They keep crossing my path all the time. I kept wondering why. And it turned out that their Krishnite temple is actually not far from where I live. So they're basically my buddies. For as long as I've lived here, not a day goes by without me running into them. Well, less often in winter, of course, but in summer, yeah, every day. When people come to Vilnius, especially newcomers, I like showing them around because I'm kind of an old-timer here. And I always trick everyone, telling them that this monument is called The Girl and the Pedophile, that this man is luring the girl somewhere. But that's actually not true. Of course, that's slander, it's dark humor. This is a monument to Dr. Tzemach Shabbat, as he was called, who treated children and the poor, and actually served as the prototype for the doctor. And the pain from the famous fairy tale, because this doctor lived right here in Vilnius. So they put up this beautiful, touching monument to him. Actually, I really like it. I happened to wander into this courtyard by accident. It was recently restored here, and I read that in this building, it's written here, that this was the ghetto council. And where people were killed. 1,200 Jews, residents of the ghetto. This is where the infamous Judenrat was actually located. Probably not a very cheerful place, but now everything here is new and clean. A restoration center. The square in front of the town hall. The town hall is in front of me. And behind me is Town Hall Square. And from there the street continues on. That's where the tower of the Orthodox Church called the Great stands. And it then turns into Castle Street, which leads to the main square and to Gediminas Castle. This is the cathedral, which is now Catholic again. It was originally Catholic, but at some point during the Tsarist administration, it became Orthodox. Later, when Tsarist rule returned, it was given back to the Catholic Church. It was rebuilt several times. Right now, I'm not even sure what's there. I think there's a concert going on. Across from it is the historic Astoria Hotel, which still operates as a hotel today. There have even been events held there from time to time that I participated in. It used to be considered the best hotel, though of course now it's no longer the best, but it's still a decent historic hotel. A lot of historical films are shot in this part of the city. In particular, I remember that a German or Austrian TV series about Empress Sisi was filmed here, and the whole area was disguised as Old Vienna. It was very interesting. This building decorated with those ridiculous berries is the Pavas Hotel. As it turns out, it was a hotel even before the war, before World War I, before the revolution. It is said that Anna Akhmatova came here to say goodbye to Gumilyov, who was leaving for the front right in this very hotel. At that time, this was the provincial city of Vilno, where all of this took place. Further on, there is a restored old building, the Church of St. Teresa. And if you look in that direction, you can see a skyscraper already in the new part of Vilnius, which is located across the river. That's why you get such a combination of old and new from here. This is a very beloved place in Vilnius. For some reason, it's not very well known, even though it's right in the city center. What makes it interesting? It's interesting because this church has a complicated history. This is an Orthodox church. It was originally built, there's a plaque there, in honor of the Grand Hetman Konstanty Ostrogsky. He was Orthodox and built this Orthodox church, founding it to commemorate his victory over the Moscow army. So he was Orthodox, but as the Lithuanian Hetman, Polish-Lithuanian, he defeated the Moscow army, and in honor of that, he founded this very church. And it wasn't founded just by chance. There's a display over there showing that even back in pagan times, this place was significant. The Lithuanians killed the Orthodox monks, the Filinski martyrs. There's information about them over there, written in old script, explaining who they were. So, the Orthodox Church was founded in honor of the Filinski Orthodox martyrs by Hetman Konstantin Ostrogsky, who fought against the Moscow Tsardom on the side of the Polish-Lithuanian forces. But that's not the end of the story, because later the church became uniate, it joined the union, and there's a memorial plaque there in honor of a saint. Josephat Kuntsevich, he's a uniate saint who couldn't stand the Orthodox. He was basically involved in converting Orthodox Christians to the uniate faith. He was apparently someone in this church, I don't remember exactly who. Now it's a Ukrainian uniate church. You can go inside and have a look, but everything is very badly damaged. I don't know what it was like during Soviet times, but everything there was pretty neglected. Right now it's being restored, but as far as I understand, this is the only Ukrainian uniate church in Vilnius. And this is a uniate monastery, a holy one. It's called the Holy Trinity. Here, everything is written with yat and hard signs that on the site of this church, where there used to be an oak grove in the middle of the 14th century, the holy martyrs, Lithuanian, Vilnius miracle workers, Anatoly, John, and Eustathius accepted a martyr's death for the Orthodox Christian faith. Here are Anatoly, John, and Eustathius. Holy martyrs, Lithuanians. But I want to say that this is not the only place where pagan Lithuanians killed Christian monks. At the completely opposite end of the city, on a hill, stand 3 crosses at the place where Catholic monks were killed. Obviously, back in those times, in the 13th, 14th centuries, Lithuanians didn't really like it when Christian monks came to them with their fiery sermons. Vilnius is also a very important place for Poles and Polish culture because Adam Mickiewicz lived here. Here there is a memorial plaque in Polish and Lithuanian stating that he lived here and wrote the poem Grażyna. There is a special exhibition here, meaning he studied at Vilnius University. And because of this, there are many houses with signs saying that Adam Mickiewicz lived here, who is known to Lithuanians as Adomas Mickevičius. So we will show you these numerous memorial plaques. Behind me is the Gate of Dawn, called Aušros Vartai in Lithuanian. Well, this is one of the ancient entrances to Vilnius. At the back, which we will show later, there are remnants of the fortress wall. This really was an entrance to the city. Above it, there is a chapel like this. You see, inside in the gilded shrine sits the Mother of God herself, Our Lady of the Gate of Dawn, a sacred icon for three nations, Polish, Belarusian and Lithuanian. It is an Orthodox shrine, but also a Catholic one. Inside, there are votive offerings hanging. It's quite an interesting place. You can go in and no one gets upset with you. In the past, everyone was required to take off their hats here. This was back in the days of the Romanov Tsars and earlier monarchs, because it was considered a holy place and everyone passing by had to remove their hats and make the sign of the cross. Now, there are no such rules. You can walk through even with your hat on, however you like. Well, on major church holidays, they set up chairs here and hold services. In fact, these are very popular holy sites. And here there's a very interesting contrast. You step out of the old town and immediately find yourself in something more or less modern. Further on, as you can see, there are Soviet-era apartment blocks. This is in fact the end of the old town. These are the very gates. Now I'll show you what they look like from the outside. They say it was through these gates that the troops of the Moscow Tsardom entered Vilnius, or Vilno. This was during the war back in the 17th century when the ducal palace was burned down. And in general, everyone who came here as conquerors entered from this direction, because there's a house over there with traces left behind. There are still bullet marks from the last war. Basically, nothing passed by these gates unnoticed. Here's a very strange courtyard. I also discovered it by accident during my walks around Vilnius. Especially during COVID, I walked around the city a lot and peeked into all sorts of gateways. That's how I happened to find this interesting gateway by chance. I don't know who did all this or why, but it's just a wonderful place. Here, you can even see yourself in the mirror. And here, there's this... These are entrances to apartments, as far as I understand. So it's not some kind of... It's just a space like that, someone's entrance to their home. People simply live here, going about their everyday lives. See, there are cars parked here and old wooden sheds. So this isn't some kind of museum or tourist courtyard. It's just that for some reason people decided to decorate it like this themselves. You can still see some Soviet-era signs left here. Such an interesting Vilnius courtyard. This is St. Spirit Street, one of the oldest and best preserved historic streets. This is the Orthodox Holy Spirit Monastery, and this is its back wall. That's actually why the street is named that way. They often shoot films about old times here, although there's also a completely new and rather expensive residential building here. And in the distance we can see the Vilnius Barbican, that is, the restored city fortifications. Well, here's the cobblestone just as it should be. And further on there's also an old house. Such picturesque and beautiful street. And so we continue our walk along these less obvious routes. This is the Holy Spirit Monastery and the Vilnius Barbican. According to legend, a terrible beast and a basilisk live in the basement there. I don't know, I haven't seen them. Everything here is blooming and fragrant. Next we see this building here, which is also rather strange. In terms of architecture, this is the oldest Orthodox cathedral. A cathedral, as I understand it, it's just that it was oddly restored in the 19th century. Next, this red tower on the hill is the famous Gediminas Tower. There used to be a castle belonging to Prince Gediminas, the founder of the city. Only this one tower remains from it. And here, in fact, we are standing on one of the hills, and over there is Užupis. and from here you can admire the panorama of Vilnius. This is one of those spots. This little bridge here leads to Užupis. On the hill, that's the Catholic Belarusian church, quite cute and very small. This is the river. And here begins a new district, which used to be an industrial zone. And literally in recent years, including before my eyes, this former industrial area has turned into the trendiest, most modern and most expensive district in Vilnius. There really are some very beautiful modern buildings here. And it's always very pleasant to take a walk here, which I do regularly. Not only me, often I run into my friends here as well. So we've arrived in Užupis. This is a very popular district among those who rarely or have never been to Vilnius. It's written about a lot in guidebooks. And this street here, it was only recently finished. In fact, the whole time I lived here, they kept working on it and working on it. It's very new, very glamorous, very beautiful, and very interesting. But it's more a symbol of the new Užupis, which has now become touristy, expensive, and very trendy. Although originally it all started as a very poor neighborhood where the riverside district, where because of low real estate prices, artists and creatives gathered, the Bohemians. It was here that they created the myth of the Republic of Užupis. But all of that is a bit further towards the city. We're now in the most, so to speak, freshly renovated part of Užupis. Now we'll walk through the old part as well and film that too. The attempt to film how beautiful Vilnius is in the summer was interrupted by rain. Here I am sitting in the square by the angel in Užupis. There's this column with an angel standing here. This is a cafe right next to that column. But overall, the plan was to keep filming while the sun was out, but the sun disappeared. And really, this is about the weather. Unfortunately, it's not always summer in Vilnius. There are also rather gloomy autumns here, cold and unpleasant winters, and in general, a pretty long spring. So if you've seen all the sunny views and think it's always a resort here, well, no, it's not always like that. We quite often have not so great weather here. Rain is not uncommon at all. The climate in Lithuania isn't resort-like. It's more for those who appreciate it, more of a St. Petersburg type of climate, so keep that in mind. And here we are again in Užupis. This is a district that's positioned as a place where all sorts of workshops, shops and artists create. They invent, they experiment. It's called the Užupis Art Incubator. We're going to go in there now. Along the embankment, there are all sorts of art objects and other interesting things on display. Then we'll make our way to the Tibetan Square and continue our hopefully fascinating tour of Vilnius. This place is called Tibetan Square. Here, Lithuanians express their support for the Tibetan people and their dislike of Chinese imperialism. Right here, there's even a special prayer drum. I don't know how authentic it is, but it looks real. Interestingly, if you cross this bridge, you'll find yourself at the Orthodox Church on Russian Street. So this is the remarkable juxtaposition of Tibetan Square and Russian Street in Vilnius. Let's go there. Russian Street. Not because it's Russian, but obviously because it's Orthodox. Right here nearby is the oldest cathedral, a large one, also originally built in the Middle Ages. Later, it was rebuilt and altered many times. And that's how it looks now as well. In the 19th century, during a general reconstruction, it was remodeled. But here, the most Russian street either ends at or begins from it, which is obviously why it's called that. It leads right to the Russian church. There's an international lyceum here. It's a popular place for expat children. This is a monument. It's dedicated to Adam Mickiewicz, better known as Adam Mickiewicz. The little park is named in his honor. There's a commemorative sign here stating that in August 1987, the first rally of the Sonjudis movement for the restoration of Lithuania's independence took place here. This is an ancient medieval church. It's unique for Vilnius because Vilnius is a brick city. Here are two such Gothic brick buildings, which are more typical of northern Germany. But here there are actually two such buildings, although this bell tower is of a later construction, but the church behind it, St. Anne's, is original. I believe this is the Dominican church, but it used to be called Bernardine because behind it is the Bernardine Garden Park. A very beautiful, pleasant place. Well, these are the very Bernardine Gardens. There's a river flowing there, a fountain, and people stroll around. There are cafes, people sit on the grass. There's also a small beer garden with all sorts of tasty treats. It's a nice place. I recommend visiting in the summer. All in all, during filming, it turned out that it's very difficult to capture all the places in Vilnius, because I only realized it at the last moment, literally right before leaving. That's why we didn't go to the Vilnius TV tower, which is actually a copy of the Yekaterinburg TV tower that was never built. We also didn't go to various other districts where I've been before and which have their own interesting spots. So basically we limited ourselves to walking around the city center and didn't get to see everything. Because, like with any city where you've lived for a long time, Vilnius for me is filled with different places, and the impressions from those places were formed even before I moved here as an immigrant. As for Vilnius, I had actually only been here twice before, both times during the autumn-winter season, let's say. I came here for some events. And overall, I had the feeling that, well, I'd been here twice and that was enough. There was nothing to see, and I'd seen it all. I never thought I would end up living here for almost 3 years. So when I ended up here in the summer of 2020, in a way, my discovery of Vilnius started from scratch. And now I can really give tours around the city. Sometimes I even had fun when friends or acquaintances came to visit. I would give them these kinds of tours. These are the interesting conclusions I've drawn after trying to make the first travel blog film on my channel. By the way, if you like this genre and enjoy these kinds of films, make sure to like and leave comments, and then more films like this will appear. Now, I'll be living in another exciting and vibrant city, and if you truly like what you see, I'll certainly try to film similar and engaging stories for you, not only in Brussels, but also in other fascinating cities I'll be visiting and exploring in the future. And yes, of course, subscribe to the channel. Be sure to subscribe to my channel. I'm standing on the White Bridge. This is a pedestrian bridge for walking that connects the two halves of the city across the river. You can see the river behind me, and on the other bank from the old town is the new city. It's modern, but that's not its official name. I just call it the new city. It's simply a new district of Vilnius, the area around Konstitucijos Avenue. Over there you can see the city hall with a sign about Putin and The Hague. There are skyscrapers under construction and already built. And also, there's the Tsum from the Soviet era, which is called the Plitovsky Tsum. You can see it here as well. So you can see that Vilnius has not only old buildings, but also modern ones. This is Rudninkų Square. It's kind of central. During Soviet times, this square was actually the central square. Somewhere around here, there used to be a monument to Lennon where the flag is now, or so I've been told. Well, or maybe over here. Anyway, it was somewhere around here. Over there is the former KGB building. Somewhere here, I think, there was the Communist Party building. So basically, this was probably the main square of Soviet Vilnius. And even now, it's the main beautiful square. You see, it's all full of flowers and people strolling around. Back there, there's a church. The Church of the Apostles Philip and Jacob. It has a very good Karelan, so if we wait until it starts to chime, we'll show you how it sounds. And there's also a robot here. We're going to check out the robot too, because on this square, there's a special robot that mows the lawns. This is my favorite robot. Whenever I go for a walk, I often come to watch how it mows the lawns here. I've only seen a robot like this here. Here it is. It drives around here and mows the lawn in this square. Sometimes they fence it off so that no one bothers or harms it, but I've never seen anyone mistreat this wonderful, amazing helper of people. Well, if you can hear it, that's the chime. The carillon of the Church of the Apostles Peter, Philip, and James. This is very uncharacteristic for Vilnius. There are a few places like this, so it's really cool. If you visit Vilnius, be sure to wait for the hour. Every hour, there's interesting bell music. A very interesting place. It appeared not so long ago. At this spot, the leaders of the uprising were executed. The Polish, Lithuanian, Belarusian uprising against the Russian Empire. Konstanty Kalinowski and other participants of the uprising, they were killed here. This was outside the city at the time because at that time their bodies were taken to the fortress and buried there. They were found recently and a memorial was created at that site. But near the church there is this commemorative place. Very lovely, yet a reminder of sad events. This is the main avenue of Vilnius, Prince Gediminas Avenue, Gediminas Avenue. It used to be called Lennon Avenue, and in general it had many other names as well. It's Monday now, the middle of the workday, and you can see that the traffic isn't actually very heavy. There aren't that many cars. Well, in general, that's not surprising because Vilnius isn't such a big city, and it's actually normal that there aren't many cars. I mean, you could walk out into the center of the avenue and even film there, but we won't be doing that. And behind me is a commercial club. It's still a commercial club now. It's a beautiful building with a sculpture. Various events are held there in which, and I've had the chance to participate, so maybe you will too. Here we are standing by the former KGB building, former Gestapo. During the war, this was the Gestapo, and under the Germans, the avenue was called Adolf Hitler Strasse. Now, just like in the times of the Tsars, courts and some judicial offices are located here again. The building was originally constructed during the Tsarist era for judicial institutions. But here there is also a large exhibition about the struggle of Lithuanians for independence, because when the KGB was here, people were tortured and even executed in the basements. Because of this, the museum here is rather grim. I've been there once. Basically, people were executed right in the basement of this building. And on the walls are written the names of the people who died here, who were interrogated here. It's all written here. You can take a look. There's even a commemorative plaque somewhere on the floor about a person who couldn't withstand the torture and jumped out of the window. Actually, I ended up in Lithuania after I was convicted. I spent a week in administrative detention for insulting the judges of the Constitutional Court of Russia, as it was written in my sentence. And so, when I arrived in Vilnius, I was told, here is the Constitutional Court of Lithuania, go ahead if you want. You can also do something here. You can talk about the judges of the Constitutional Court of Lithuania, and nothing will happen to you for it. I actually haven't tested that because I have no complaints. Judging by the traditional etiquette, I don't really have any. But there is such a building, and inside hang copies of the texts about Lithuania's independence with signatures. This building is on Gedimino Avenue. This is a monument to the Lithuanian writer Žemaitė. That is her pseudonym. In reality, she was a peasant woman who wrote stories in Lithuanian. Such a monument was erected to her. In winter, it looks much sadder than it does now. And obviously, to somehow liven up this not very cheerful square, they painted a very bright and beautiful mural on the wall there, in contrast to Madame Žemaitė. But overall, it's clearly a monument built during the Soviet era. It's quite a nice square, also located on Gedimino Avenue. This is the intersection of three streets. Here begins Pylimo Street, here it ends, and Paminakalnių begins. Poguliaevskaya and Prince Yagayev Street. Here's a charming little cafe serving Israeli cuisine, though unfortunately it's vegetarian, so if you like pita with meat, this isn't the place for you. And right over there, just until this spring, there used to be a monument to Petras Kevirka, a Lithuanian Soviet writer. The monument was demolished because after so many years of Lithuania's independence, it was finally decided that he was not a good person, a bad apple, since he signed the act for Lithuania to join the Soviet Union. But he was a leftist writer, so there's no more Petroskvirka there, but there used to be a very typical Soviet monument with a forelock. That was the kind of guy who stood there. Since we're passing by here, I can't help but stop at this wonderful Jewish establishment. Here they have shakshuka, buns, bagels, and all sorts of other things. I highly recommend this building. It's the Jewish Community Center of Vilnius. The building of the Reformed Church was constructed in the style of an ancient temple, and inside it has very interesting ceilings in an antique Italian style. It's quite a strange impression. In general, this is a Reformed church because the place we're filming from is called Reformators Square, since the historic building of the Reformed Synod is located here. In fact, there used to be a cemetery where the square is now. But now it's a picturesque, pleasant park, and we'll show it to you one last time as well, because it took quite a long time to build, and if I remember correctly, it was only opened last summer. That's why I love walking here since then, and even lying in the hammocks that are here. Well, this is the space. They literally finished it just this year. But since I walk past here all the time, and throughout all these years while it was being built, I walked by, and I still do now. I really like this place. It's behind the Museum of Modern Art. There's a really nice path going up here. But there's a staircase there, and you can take it to get to the place where I live in Vilnius all this time. There are lots of coffee shops here, all sorts of convenience spots and photo zones. So it's a pleasant place, of course, though in winter it's not as fun here as it is in many other places, just like in summer. This is probably the best shawarma place in Vilnius, na Pylimo Gatve. If you want shawarma or other Arab and Middle Eastern dishes, this is the place to go. The owner, I think he's Syrian, is a very good, pleasant person. They've been working here for a long time and are always happy to welcome guests. Nearby, there's also a popular, glamorous cafe called Lova. They serve breakfast there all day, and I've eaten there myself a few times. This is a very interesting place for me in Vilnius. Right there, that little veranda with the trees, that was my first apartment in Vilnius. When I arrived here in August 2020, after crossing the Russian border on foot with 2 suitcases, I came to Vilnius. At first, I had booked a different apartment. They told me I had to quarantine, so I had to urgently rebook, literally on the go. And the same owners said they had another apartment, one with a veranda and a small kitchen. So I took a taxi here, straight from the border. And there on that veranda, I sat, rested, and slept. Basically, I lived there for the whole week. That's how my life in Vilnius began. Right in this place, above these gates. And then I walked down Pylimo Street, which starts right here, to explore the city with new eyes, the eyes of someone who was about to live here. This is a unique monument, a monument to the young Taras Shevchenko, and that's why he's not depicted here in the usual image of a mustachioed man, but as a young man, because he studied in Vilnius, at Vilnius University. And here in the old town, there is this original monument to Taras Shevchenko in a very nice, pleasant square with lots of cafes, and sometimes there's even a market by the tower. I am sitting in one of the many cafes on German Street, Walkecho Gatwe. This is one of the most popular walking streets in Vilnius. They say that this used to be the most popular street for walking. There are now 2 other more popular streets with restaurants. We'll show them to you a little later. These are Peles Gatwe and Vilar Gatwe. What's nice and interesting here is that this is a very old street originally, but only this half where I'm sitting has old Stalin-era buildings. After the war, this area was built up and became something like a Kempinski Boulevard, and over there is the Town Hall Square, and further on in that direction is Vilial Gatwe. And further that way is the Old Town, which we will also visit now. This street is called German Street because German merchants used to live here, and they had a German church here which still exists today. It explicitly states that the historic Lutheran Church was originally founded in the year 1555, and this impressive bell tower, a significant architectural feature, dates precisely from 1872. This is a typical Lutheran church. Here, services are held in English, and as I understand it, also in German and maybe even in Lithuanian. Here's a small, cozy courtyard in the alley off German Street. Now we're entering this rather plain archway, a typical arch of a Stalin-era building. Listen, let's take a break. Go ahead, Gleb. And we keep going, walking through a completely unremarkable courtyard. Here stands a typical Soviet kindergarten, which isn't operating now. This used to be the center of the Jewish quarter, which was completely demolished during the war, so now it's empty here. It was obviously very densely built up here before. This street we're coming out onto is called Jewish Street, Žydų gatvė. That's actually why it's called that, because the Great Vilna Synagogue once stood here, right where this unimpressive kindergarten is now. It was destroyed during the war and nothing remains of it. In Soviet times, they didn't bother to restore it. They built a kindergarten on the site. Now no one really knows what to do with it. So what's left here? There's a monument left. Now we'll show you the monument to the main local Jewish sage, the so-called Vilna Gaon. His name is written there now on the monument. There's a plaque there. He lived here. So right here where this kindergarten was, there used to be a big synagogue and he lived nearby. It says here, to the great Gaon Eliyahu. His name was Eliyahu. He lived here in this house next to the synagogue. In general, as it even says here, he lived in the 18th century. He lived here. This is a very revered monument. His grave was at the Jewish cemetery across the river. It's still there now, even though the cemetery itself no longer exists. Let's keep going. And now we're walking down this street. You see the houses here are already old. And just around the corner, we'll find ourselves right in the very center of Vilnius's old town. This is an iconic spot where everyone takes photos for Instagram, for movies, and for all the promotional brochures. It's this little corner where two streets meet, the intersection of Jewish Street and Stekolščikov, probably Stiklių gatvė, and also Gaon Street. Here is this picturesque crossroads with a cafe, a very good hotel, and all sorts of other interesting places serving the public. Let's put it that way. All over the city you can see these little doors. That's where the gnomes actually live, and at night they come out from there, walk around the city and steal people, children, and drag them down into their underground lair. Of course, that's not true. It's just a joke. I just thought, who could such a small door be for? Maybe gnomes live there. I've never actually checked. If you find yourself nearby, be sure to go into all the courtyards. See this courtyard in the old town? Definitely go in. There's always something interesting, like this little courtyard, because that's a unique feature of the old town. You can walk along the streets, and if you don't go into the courtyards, you'll miss half of it. So don't be afraid. Go everywhere and check them all out. While I lived here, I went into every courtyard in the old town, but I won't show you all of them because that would take too much time. I'll just show you the most remarkable courtyards and alleyways. I'll show you. Here is a memorial plaque in honor of Fyodor Dostoevsky, who stayed here, not in this building, but at this location. And it's not surprising because everyone who traveled to Europe in the 19th century and earlier usually went as far as Vilnius, and from here they would head to Prussia and then further into Europe, and Dostoevsky as well. Curious, what's next? Along this street, which we're about to walk down, it's called Great Street, the main one, there's a house where Lev Karsavin lived while in exile. In another house, which now houses the French Institute. On one of the corners, there's a church where Pushkin was supposedly baptized, or rather not Pushkin himself, but Pushkin's grandfather, but that's not entirely true. It even says here that the Church of St. Nicholas is the oldest Orthodox church in Vilnius, and supposedly the first church on this site was built by the second wife of Prince Algirdas. Known in Russian sources as Olgird. Her name was Yuliana Alexandrovna, Princess of Tver, and so she built here the first church. Naturally, she did not live to see this moment. Later, another church was demolished. And this particular church was built in the 19th century when the Russian imperial authorities restored all the Orthodox churches here so that they would look beautiful, unlike how they looked by that time. And it even says here that having been brought to a sad state of humiliation during the time of the Union, in some year, I can't make it out, in 18-something, at the request of Mikhail Nikolaevich Muravyov. That's the very same Muravyov, the hangman, who, by the way, suppressed the Kalinovsky uprising. It was restored in splendor with donations from all of Russian lands. Everything here is written in Cyrillic with yats, and it stands in the center of Vilnius, not bothering anyone, although the attitude toward Mikhail Nikolaevich Muravyov here, to be honest, is not very friendly, and with good reason. This is the very best. Now it's considered the new hotel of Vilnius. It's the renovated palace of Hetman Pak. It's called Pak. It's a 5-star hotel, very modern, very good. So if you're a wealthy person and planning to visit Vilnius, this is the place for you. Although if you're really rich and want true luxury, there's the Kempinski here. It's more expensive there, but in my opinion, much more boring. It's not that I lived there, but I happened to visit both places, so to speak. So if anything, I'm on Team Pak. As you can see from the memorial plaques, in the same house that DJI-1 lived, first of all, Stendhal. Stendhal, as it says, was a French writer. He was here in 2012 because together with Napoleon's army, he was obviously heading to Russia. And then Professor Lev Karsavin, a philosopher, lived here in 1940 and 1949. Here are his plaques. Now there's a French institute and a French bookstore here. Well, not only French books, but mostly French. So what does it say there? The Orthodox Church of Chia is the first stone Christian shrine in Vilnius. It was built on the site of the pagan sanctuary of God Ragutis. In 1345, it was dedicated to the wife of the Grand Duke of Lithuania and Rusis, as it says here, Algirdas, Maria Yaroslavna, Princess of Vilnius, and to Saint Paraskeva the Great, called Payatnitsa. That is Algirdas, let me repeat, in Lithuanian, Algirdas, a highly revered Lithuanian prince. It is written that during the reign of Alexander II, all of this was restored, and there is also a description of this very legend, the legend of the entire church. In 1705, Emperor Peter the Great attended a Thanksgiving service here for the victory over the troops of Charles V, and in this church, he baptized the African Hannibal, the grandfather of our famous poet A.S. Pushkin. So there is a tradition that Peter baptized the little African boy Hannibal here. But in my opinion, that's just a legend. As far as I know, there's no confirmation that it actually happened here, but it's a local legend. Well, here is in fact the very place where that same Ragutis, the Lithuanian god, stood, a kind of memorial marker. Here is actually a pagan altar. The fire is always burning here, even at night. So there is a small community of Lithuanian pagans and people who maintain this place, which is sacred to them in this condition. Honestly, I didn't quite understand whether whether Ragutis was right on the site of the current church or if they just built it next to the former sacred place. So this is a sacred place. Here you have both the Orthodox Church and this very altar of the god Ragutis. And this is the Cathedral Square of Vilnius in the city center. It's also an interesting place for me because over there is the Amberton Hotel. That's the very hotel where I stayed in Vilnius when I first came here as a tourist. And right next to it, by the way, is that very Kempinski I mentioned. And of course, this is the city center. Here is the bell tower, the cathedral rebuilt in the classical style from Gothic, which is why it looks a bit like a Kempinski house of culture. But in reality, it's a cathedral and it's very old. Further on, there's a monument to the founder of Vilnius, Prince Gediminas. I saw how for Star Wars Day, they dress him up in a cloak, paint his sword, and he stands there like Darth Vader. That's where Pylimo Street begins, the famous tourist street with all the restaurants. We showed it at the beginning, and over there is where Gedimino Avenue starts, which we've already seen as well, and now we're going to continue along it. And we're back on Gedimino Avenue. Gedimino Avenue is bustling. They close it off on weekends and holidays. They hold fairs here and set up all sorts of different cafes. The whole area is filled with tables. Even the roadway is, and behind us is the drama theater. Frightening women, they actually don't symbolize anything scary. They're just muses, as I understand it. But every time I walk by, I think, oh my god, how terrifying. But that's what Soviet Lithuanian architecture was like. This street is called Tatar Street, Tataru Gatve. It's even written here in Crimean Tatar because historically Tatars lived in Vilnius and Lithuania, having been invited here by Lithuanian princes. I say they're from Crimea. So right here in the city center there's this street. As you can see from the surroundings, this is a favorite spot for Vilnius youth. People skateboard here. And there's a monument to the author of Lithuania's national anthem, the poet Vincas Kudirka. It's located in a special place where during Soviet times there was a monument to General Cherniakovsky. That monument was removed from here, and now Kudirka stands in its place. Behind it is the building where the Prime Minister of Lithuania works. In other words, that's the Lithuanian government. That's where they hold their sessions. It's also important to mention that the text of the Lithuanian anthem is inscribed on the monument. Interestingly, it was first performed in St. Petersburg, because naturally, Lithuanian students and intellectuals studied there during the Russian Empire, but the monument itself stands here in Vilnius. Here you'll find all the cafes and restaurants. This is the main street where, in the summer, this place has the highest concentration of bars, cafes, and restaurants. And on summer evenings, the fun lasts until late at night. There's a festive atmosphere here. And if you sit here on a nice evening at one of the cafes, you can meet all sorts of people who live in Vilnius. And while I was here myself, I often like to sit somewhere and meet someone. I enjoyed that too. There are also offices here belonging to various well-known organizations, and many famous people who live here now work here. But I won't be giving away any networks, secrets, or mysteries of Vilnius. It's just a bustling street where all the various roads and winding paths gracefully converge. And in actual fact, I've quite often walked through this particularly interesting and rather significant intersection several times throughout the course of a typical day. This is Vilniaus Street, the part we just walked along. In the evening, it's truly the hottest and most vibrant, liveliest spot. Dmitry Bardakas and several others work diligently here. This is Islandijos Street. It's basically all bars, all the way up to where the greenery starts. Just bars, bars, bars. And these are cocktail bars. If you love cocktails, this is the place for you. Alchemikos and other venues are waiting for you. What's surprising here? This building houses the Ministry of Health of Lithuania. So right in the heart of this bar hurricane, they sit and look after the health of Lithuanians and all the residents of the Republic of Lithuania. And finally, what do we have here? We have the former Razvilov Palace. The Razvilovs were one of the wealthiest families in the region. One of their palaces was right here. Here it is over there as well, all of this. That was their palace. Honestly, there's nothing interesting inside. During Soviet times, everything inside was destroyed. And it's very boring inside. There are some concrete slabs. So I've been there once. This inscription, the hashtag MEZNATO, we are NATO, isn't just anywhere. It's right in the city center on Tatarskaya Street, where the Department or Ministry of Regional Security, the Ministry of Defense of the Republic of Lithuania, is located. It occupies an entire block here, and there's even a church of the Lithuanian Armed Forces. So basically it's the Lithuanian Ministry of Defense located right next to the presidential palace. It's also right in the city center, so you constantly walk past it, past that inscription. There's also a monument here to General Jonas Žemaitis, who led the anti-Soviet partisan movement in Lithuania. And now officially he is considered to have been the head of Lithuania. Back in the 1940s, while the partisan movement was ongoing, although, as I understand it, he was later killed by Soviet punitive forces, but his monument still stands right here in front of the Ministry of Defense. This is actually the backyard of the presidential palace. There's a fountain and chess. And actually, there's even an ordinary robot. Look, there it goes again. Probably the personal robot of the Lithuanian president, which takes care of the lawns. But in fact, you can come in here, and generally, people are allowed in quite freely, without any checks, but usually on weekends, because when it's a work day and the president is at work, then it's closed off. But you can see that, first of all, there are these chess pieces, and secondly, there are loungers in the corners. You can tell that everything here is set up for people to stroll and relax. People really do walk and relax here, and I've come here myself more than once. Here's another unexpected and interesting courtyard, a courtyard in the Renaissance style. By the way, the Italian Cultural Center and an Italian restaurant are located here. Fiorentino really is quite something. It's a typical Italian place. In addition, there are several interesting art objects here, which are always a pleasant surprise to come across when you just walk into the courtyard next to the Parisian palace. Here's an ordinary door in the wall. Where does it lead? Let's take a look. There are interesting, unexpected encounters waiting for us there. Who do we have right in the hallway? Jesus. Jesus the Lord crucified. See, there's a candle standing there. But that's not all the adventures that await us in this mysterious courtyard. So here we have a church, and over here people live. These are residential buildings. And here we have another one, an entire Jesus lying here in the form of a head with hands. See, there's a trimmed bush and a head. Well, even though we haven't gone into any church yet, we will go into one church after all. And it's not exactly a church, it's the vestibule of a church. This is, first of all, one of the largest functioning churches in Vilnius. You can't really tell that it's big when you're up close, but from a distance you can see that it's one of the largest in the old town. And what's interesting here? If we go in here, the church itself is over there. And this is kind of like a vestibule. Here in this particular location, there are these incredibly detailed and vivid paintings depicting various scenes of hell. We didn't actually go into the church building itself, you know. And here, once again, one more time. We won't go in there because it's probably not allowed to film inside. But to me, that's actually the most interesting part. The church, I'll say again, is very large and beautiful here. As I understand it, in Poland, it's bigger than the one in Lviv, in Poryad. It's along the Polish streets, and like in the service,